Hello, my name's Tamika, and you're listening to A Walk in the Park with Animal Friends.
Welcome back, Sam. So from one extreme to the other, we've just talked about hot weather. Let's move to cold weather. So similar with how hot is too hot, how cold is too cold for, say, a dog?
Well, let's hope we don't have to worry about this for a little while. But too cold, again, every pet is different. You've got dogs that are bred for the cold weather. Look at your Huskies, your Bernese Mountain Dogs, versus your little shivery Whippets and Greyhounds who are very skinny without much padding on them. They're going to suffer more. Generally, as a rule, I'd say anything under 7 degrees starts to get uncomfortable for our pets. And we need to be aware of the cold weather and make sure we adjust our routines to suit. Now, if we're talking about what temperature gets genuinely dangerous for them, at about -6 degrees, the risk of hypothermia becomes really real. So thankfully, not a temperature we experience a lot in this country. And therefore, cold weather is something we can handle pretty well.
And then you mentioned hypothermia there. How will I know if my dog is starting to suffer from hypothermia?
So hypothermia means the body temperature has dropped below the normal range and your pet is at risk of becoming too cold and it kind of damaging and causing stress on their internal organs. And the key symptoms for this, generally your pet will start to slow down.
Okay.
They'll become very sleepy and lethargic and probably want to curl up in a corner and more than usual and feel a bit sorry for themselves. They will be quite cold to the touch. And if you were to look at their gums or kind of the inside of a pale ear, you'd see that what is usually pink, either bright pink or a pale pink, would be very pale. We'd be talking white. So that means that their body is preserving all of their blood supply into the really important bits internally and not feeding it outwards. And your pet will shiver. In the early stages of hypothermia, your pet will start to shiver. When they get very advanced, if you haven't noticed, and they are very cold, that will actually stop because that is the body's natural mechanism for warming them back up. And past a certain point, they won't be able to do that.
Okay, and then helping to keep them warm. So what about coats and jumpers? Does every breed need one of those? I know you mentioned about Huskies and stuff before that are quite adapt to the cold. So what about a long-haired breed, like a Borzoi, who's still skinny but quite long-haired? Do they need a coat?
Not every dog will need a coat. Again, it is a bit of a personal thing for your pet. But as a general rule, I'd say any pet without a thick coat and a woolly coat, like that Borzoi, whose coat is thin, even though they are a big dog, will need something in those colder months. So, I mean, there's a range of jackets out there from just kind of windproof, waterproof, that'll just take a little bit of the wind's edge off, to lovely thick fleecy jumpers. And you'll know your dog a little bit as to what kind of level of protection.
So then what about cats, Sam? Are they just as likely to get as cold as dogs can?
They have the same temperature thresholds that become kind of dangerous and uncomfortable for them. So again, around that 7 degrees, you've got to be a little bit careful. If you do have a cat who likes to go out and roam at night, probably around that temperature, I'd be considering keeping them in or just making sure they have access overnight to come back in. They are often quite sensible about things and will come back in if it's too cold. Or they'll seek shelter somewhere else.
And you mentioned about the symptoms of hypothermia with a dog, so the really pale ear, the shivering. Is that the same for our cats as well?
It is the same. What it is worth remembering with cats is they can be quite coy about showing us these symptoms. They generally like to pretend everything's fine. So you might not notice the shivering. Because often with cats, they'll hide that bit. And when things get a little bit more serious, that's when you're likely to notice that there's a problem. So just be on the alert and check in for your cat, particularly if you do have a cat that goes outside and they're missing for any length of time. When they come back, give them a good feel over, make sure they're not feeling cold to the touch.
Okay, and then you mentioned there about outdoor roaming cats, and then the same for our dogs that we take outside for walks. Are there any hidden dangers out in the cold, in the colder months, for our dogs or our outdoor roaming cats? So I know that ice can be quite cold for their paws. What about road salt?
Yes, so ice and also getting wet are some things that I'd be kind of aware of. Particularly if your dog's running or your cat's running through deep snow or over ice, they can they hold a lot of that moisture in their fur. So that then makes them cold quicker and then can cause them quick temperature changes if they come home, and that all starts to melt as well. So just be aware of that and be prepared to give them a good toweling off whether they want it or not when they get home. With the road salt that you've mentioned, It can cause some damage to tender paws. So obviously there is salt in there and there's grit, so that can be quite sharp. It's sand to give grip to our tyres. Obviously paws are delicate things, so they don't want to be walking on that too much. If you are out walking your dog on a gritted area, you should be absolutely fine to walk them, providing that isn't too freshly laid. If it's just been laid, I'd probably avoid it for a couple of hours. After that, as long as you're coming home and washing those paws clean, it shouldn't cause you too much trouble.
Okay, so then I'm assuming there's nothing overly preventative we can do before those walks, but as long as we're bringing them back in, giving them a little wash and a towel down, they should be okay.
Exactly. Some dogs will tolerate winter boots. Little waterproof booties that would stop that becoming a problem in the first
I'm assuming
place.
not cats then.
No, good luck if you want to try that. I would not advise that. And you'll find some dogs won't walk in them at all, but others will tolerate them really well. And if they will, that's a great option.
So we mentioned there road salt. Antifreeze as well, I'm aware can be quite toxic for our pets.
Yes.
So there's kind of two places that they can encounter that. Obviously it can come from leaky cars, out and about. But we can also store that at home. So let's start at the home area. Is there anything you recommend owners to be aware of when they're storing antifreeze, just to keep those little paws or even those tiny little claws away from it?
Yeah, the reason that antifreeze is such a problem is because it actually tastes sweet to our pets, so it's quite yummy for them.
Yeah.
They don't realise it's going to cause them problems. So I would always keep your antifreeze at a height that is inaccessible to your animals.
Okay.
Bear in mind that some dogs will jump and cats will climb on counters. If you've got a high cupboard in a kitchen or a garage or something like that, that's a great way to keep it safe. Particularly if you are storing in a garage, it's often, or a shed, it's often easy for us to forget that things are there. So have a good check every year as you come to winter. Make sure you know what's on the shelf and that it is safely stored.
Okay, and then just to close this up, Sam, with a final question about antifreeze. I mentioned there that it can come from leaky cars out and about on the roads as well. So is the advice similar to what it is for road salt in terms of, obviously we can't prevent that, we may not even be aware that we're walking through it, so it's good practice potentially every time you go out for a winter walk to just dip those paws in some water and give them a dry, especially for our outdoor cats too?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're never going to be able to stop car leaks unless you're going along checking every single car, and at which point that's a job that you're never going to succeed with. So just be aware, I think, of keeping paws clean, giving them a wash when you get home. And if you do know you're coming up to winter, it's worth maybe getting your own car checked. And if everybody does that and keeps everything nice and up to date and maintained, then that risk goes down to our animals.
Great idea. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for joining us again.
No problem.
Thank you to all of our listeners. You can find out news about our podcast on our Instagram or TikTok handles, which is at Animal Friends Insurance, or on our Facebook page at Animal Friends Pet Insurance.